The manila folder was still warm from the printer when I closed my hand around it. I stood in the hallway outside the boardroom, my knuckles white against the paper, and I listened to my daughter laugh through the wall, that easy, trusting laugh I'd known since she was 4 years old. On the other side of that door, her husband was telling 11 executives a story about the old man that ended with the whole room roaring. I didn't open the door. I just tightened my grip on the folder, turned the badge on my lanyard face down against my chest, and whispered 4 words to myself that nobody else was meant to hear. Let him finish talking. My name is Walter Hedges. I'm 68 years old, and 34 years ago I started a logistics company out of a rented garage in Toledo, Ohio, with $11,000, a secondhand truck, and a promise to my late wife, Carol, that our daughter would never have to worry about money the way we once did. That company is called Hedgeway Freight Solutions. Today it moves cargo for 6 Fortune 500 clients, employs 1,200 people across 14 states, and last year it cleared $92 million in revenue. Nobody at Hedgeway calls me Walter anymore. To almost everyone on the org chart, I am a name on a stock certificate held inside a holding company called Carol Bay Holdings, named for my wife, and nothing more. I stepped back from day-to-day operations 6 years ago, after my hip surgery, and I let the board hire professional management to run things while I enjoyed retirement. What none of them knew, what I'd kept quiet for 18 months, for reasons that will become clear, was that 18 months ago, my daughter Emily's husband, Derek Voss, had been hired as the new CEO of Hedgeway Freight Solutions. My son-in-law worked for me every single day, and he had no idea. I kept it that way on purpose. I wanted to see, without my name attached to anything, exactly what kind of man my daughter had married. I told myself I was being a careful father. I didn't yet know how careful I'd need to be. It started at Emily's 32nd birthday dinner, 6 months after Derek's promotion. I sat at the far end of the table in a gray cardigan I'd had since before Carol passed, nursing a glass of water because my doctor had put me on blood thinners. Derek sat at the head, in a navy suit that cost more than my first truck payment, pouring himself a second glass of a Napa Cabernet he'd specifically asked the waiter to describe for the table's benefit. "You know," he said, swirling the glass, loud enough for the whole restaurant to catch the performance, "I used to think Hedgeway was some sleepy little trucking outfit. Turns out it just needed someone who actually understands modern logistics." He glanced at me, not unkindly, just carelessly, the way you'd glance at a chair. "No offense, Walt. I'm sure it was a nice little business back in the day." Emily laughed and swatted his arm. "Be nice, he's sitting right there." "I am being nice," Derek said. "I'm complimenting the guy who built the foundation I get to build the skyscraper on." Everyone at the table smiled. I smiled too, and folded my napkin, and said nothing at all, because the man calling my company a sleepy little outfit had, 3 weeks earlier, quietly authorized a $600,000 strategic advisory contract with a firm I'd never heard of, and I intended to find out exactly what that firm actually did. I still had read-only access to Hedgeway's financial systems through Carol Bay Holdings, access nobody had bothered to revoke, because nobody remembered the quiet old man in the cardigan owned the keys. Late one night, I pulled the vendor list and found it. Corrigan Strategic Partners, LLC, paid $600,000 for market positioning consultation over 4 months. No deliverables on file. No reports. Just 4 wire transfers. I asked Derek about it over coffee, casually, like a father curious about his son-in-law's big important job. "Oh, that," Derek said, waving his hand. "Corrigan's a boutique consultancy. They did a full competitive landscape analysis, helped us reposition our Class 8 freight vertical against 3 benchmark competitors. It's very sophisticated work, Walt. I don't want to bore you with the methodology." He smiled the smile of a man who'd used that sentence before. I nodded slowly, the way an old man nods when he doesn't quite follow. "Sounds impressive," I said, and I let it go, in front of him. That night, I searched the Ohio Secretary of State's business registry. Corrigan Strategic Partners, LLC had been registered 4 months and 2 days before the first wire transfer, 1 day after Derek's assistant, Melissa, had been added as a co-signer on a company card. The registered agent's address was a UPS mailbox 9 minutes from Derek and Emily's house. I was in the building the following week for a grandfather visits Emily at work, lunch, wandering the hallway near the executive break room, when I heard Derek's voice through the half-open door, talking to the CFO, Greg Palmer. "Relax, Greg. Nobody audits Carol Bay. It's some trust fund for an old dead guy's widow. The board barely glances at it. As long as EBITDA looks clean on the quarterly, we're fine." Greg laughed. "You're diverting company margin into your own shell company and calling it fine." "I'm diversifying," Derek said. "There's a difference. Besides, old Walt out there thinks a spreadsheet is a placemat. He signs whatever Emily tells him to sign at Thanksgiving. That man could not find this money with a flashlight and a map." I stood very still in the hallway, holding a paper cup of coffee that had gone cold in my hand, and I smiled. Not because it was funny, but because now I had exactly the sentence I needed, spoken in exactly his voice. I hired an independent forensic accountant, paid in cash, working entirely outside Hedgeway's own systems. A woman named Priya Anand, who'd done contract work for me 20 years earlier and still had my number. Within 3 weeks, Priya found a second shell entity, Meridian Fleet Advisory, receiving smaller, more frequent payments, $40,000 to $60,000 a month, structured to stay under the board's mandatory review threshold. Total diverted across both entities over 18 months, just over $2.1 million. I raised the numbers with Derek one more time, framed as a worried old man's confusion about all these consulting fees. He didn't blink. "Walt, I really need you to trust me on this. Modern freight brokerage runs on a network of specialized vendor relationships. It's not like the old days when you just paid a broker a flat commission. If I tried to explain the full vendor ecosystem to you, we'd be here till Christmas." He patted my shoulder. "Let the professionals handle the professional stuff, okay?" I thanked him for being patient with me. Then I went home and called Priya and told her to keep pulling the thread. I made a decision that night, sitting alone at my kitchen table with Carol's photograph propped against the sugar bowl the way I always kept it. I would stop being a curious old man asking questions and start being a confused old man who'd stopped asking questions altogether. I began wearing my reading glasses pushed up on my forehead instead of on my nose, so people would see me squinting at documents I could actually read perfectly well. I let my hands tremble slightly when I signed things. Not much, just enough. I started calling Derek Chief, the way a man might who'd genuinely forgotten his son-in-law's actual title. I let Emily see me misplace my car keys twice in 1 week, on purpose, so she'd mention it to Derek, so Derek would relax. Inside, I was cataloging everything. Every wire date, every LLC filing, every word Greg Palmer had ever said near an open door. But on the outside, I was just Walt, sweet, harmless, fading Walt, the kind of father-in-law you stop being careful around. The tactic was simple, and I'd learned it 30 years earlier negotiating freight contracts with men who underestimated a guy in a flannel shirt. The moment someone believes you're no threat, they stop hiding the truth from you. They start performing it, right in front of your face, because they've already decided you can't understand the show. I set the bait on a Tuesday. I accidentally mentioned to Emily, over the phone, that Carol Bay Holdings was planning to finally sell its majority stake in Hedgeway to a private equity group. A total fabrication, but a believable one, since I really was old and really was tired, and everyone assumed I'd cash out eventually. I asked her not to mention it to Derek until it was official. I knew, the way I know whether coming off Lake Erie, that she would tell him within the hour. Then I did 3 things. First, I had Priya finalize a complete forensic report. Every wire, every filing, every date, cross-referenced and notarized, sitting in a single sealed folder, the same folder I would carry into that boardroom hallway. Second, I asked my old friend and Hedgeway's outside counsel, a sharp, quiet woman named Rosalind Cho who'd known me since before Derek existed, to be present at the company's upcoming quarterly all-hands dinner, as a courtesy to an old founder. I told the board, and nobody questioned it. Third, I left my phone recording, tucked in my breast pocket, seated at that same boardroom table 3 days later, while I let Derek believe the sale rumor had made me sentimental enough to want one last visit to headquarters. I sat in the hallway outside that boardroom, the same hallway from before, and I felt my phone buzz once, twice, against my chest, Priya texting me confirmation that the notarized report had cleared. Inside the room, I could hear Derek's voice rising with laughter, telling the story about the old man who thought a shell company was a beach souvenir. I closed my hand around the folder. I did not open the door. Not yet. The quarterly all-hands dinner was held in Hedgeway's largest conference hall, 200 employees and every executive in attendance, china plates, and a podium with the company's logo lit up in blue behind it. Derek stood at that podium in his Navy suit, thanking the incredible team for record quarterly numbers, and then, because Derek could never resist an audience, he found me at the back table. And of course, he said, raising his glass toward me with a grin, a toast to Walt here, founder emeritus, who built the little garage operation that let the rest of us build something real. Walt, stand up, let people see you. I stood up, slowly, the way a tired old man stands. Actually, I said, and my voice did not rise, not once. Before I sit back down, I'd like to say a few words. If that's all right, Derek. He laughed, delighted, gesturing me toward the podium like he was doing me a favor. I walked up holding the folder. I set it on the podium. I did not raise my voice. My name is Walter Hedges, I said. 34 years ago, I started this company. I am also the sole controlling owner of Carroll Bay Holdings, which holds 61% of Hedgeway Freight Solutions. That makes me your majority shareholder and Derek's employer. The room went silent in the particular way 200 people go silent at once. 18 months ago, I continued, Derek Voss registered a shell company called Corrigan Strategic Partners 4 months before wiring its $600,000 of company funds for consulting work with no deliverables. He also directed payments to a second entity, Meridian Fleet Advisory, structured specifically to stay under this board's review threshold. Total diverted, $2,104,000. I opened the folder. This is a forensic audit, notarized last week, cross-referenced against Hedgeway's own financial records. Derek's face had gone the color of the tablecloth. Walt, you don't understand the vendor ecosystem. This is a misunderstanding. I understand it perfectly, I said, still not raising my voice. I understood it the day I heard you tell Greg Palmer, in the executive break room, that I couldn't find this money with a flashlight and a map. I turned my phone slightly, so the small red recording light caught the podium spotlight. I recorded that conversation. I have it time-stamped, alongside 11 others. Rosalind Cho rose from her seat near the door, along with 2 men I hadn't introduced, investigators from the district attorney's economic crimes unit, invited that morning under the pretense of a compliance briefing. I picked up Derek's champagne toast card off the podium, the little printed card with his prepared remarks, the one that called me founder emeritus, and I tore it once, cleanly, down the middle, and set the 2 halves down. You don't get to toast a man you were robbing, I said. Effective immediately, Derek Voss is terminated as Chief Executive Officer of Hedgeway Freight Solutions, pending criminal referral for embezzlement and wire fraud. Nobody clapped. Nobody laughed. The investigators walked forward, and Derek Voss stood very still at the head table, his glass of Napa Cabernet still in his hand, saying nothing at all. Within 72 hours, Hedgeway's board formally accepted Priya's forensic audit and Rosalind's legal filing. Derek was charged with 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of embezzlement under Ohio state law. His arraignment was covered by the local business press under the headline, Freight CEO, charged in $2 million diversion scheme. CFO Greg Palmer, facing a charge of aiding and abetting, agreed to a plea deal and full cooperation in exchange for a suspended sentence. His career in freight finance was, nonetheless, finished. 3 firms rescinded standing job offers within the month. The consulting entities, Corrigan Strategic Partners and Meridian Fleet Advisory, were dissolved by court order, their remaining funds, just over $340,000, clawed back into Hedgeway's accounts. Derek's assistant, Melissa, who'd signed as co-signer on the company card, was found to have acted entirely on his direct instruction, under implied threat of losing her job. I personally intervened with the DA's office to have all charges against her dropped, and Hedgeway kept her on staff with a formal, written apology and a raise. She cried in my office, and I told her the truth. Nobody should ever be punished for being careful enough to survive a bad boss. I also authorized full back pay corrections and a one-time bonus pool for the entire logistics floor staff, 311 employees, who'd worked an entire fiscal year under artificially suppressed departmental budgets, while Derek funneled money out the side door. It cost Hedgeway $1.8 million. I never once regretted it. Emily filed for divorce the following week. I did not gloat, not once, not even alone in my own kitchen. I only held her while she cried, and I told her the same thing Carol used to tell her when she was small and something broke that she loved. It's all right to grieve something you're better off without. 11 weeks later, on a night when the rain off Lake Erie was coming down sideways and the streetlights on my block had that flickering orange look they get before a power outage, my doorbell rang at 9:40 p.m. I opened the door and found Derek standing on my porch without an umbrella, his suit, a cheaper one now, soaked through, a duffel bag at his feet. He'd lost his apartment. His new job, a mid-level ops role at a competitor, had quietly evaporated the week his case hit the local news. He looked at me the way men look at you when they've finally run out of better doors to knock on. "Walt," he said, and his voice cracked in a way I'd never once heard it crack in 18 months of boardrooms. "I have nowhere else. Please, I know what I did. I just need somewhere to sleep tonight." I stood in the doorway for a long moment, the rain hammering the porch roof, and I thought about the folder, and the break room, and the flashlight and a map remark, and my daughter crying at my kitchen table. "You had somewhere," I said quietly. "You had a family who trusted you, a job most people spend a career trying to earn, and a wife who defended you at her own birthday dinner. You didn't lose those things, Derek. You spent them." I picked up his duffel bag from the wet porch step and held it out to him. "I hope you find somewhere warm tonight. It won't be here." I closed the door. Gently, no slam, no drama. Just a click. Inside, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table where her mother's photograph still leaned against the sugar bowl. She looked up at me, and I nodded once, and she nodded back, and that was the whole conversation we needed to have. "You all right, Dad?" she asked. "I am now," I said, and I meant it, the way you only mean things after you've carried them a very long time and finally set them down. Here's what 34 years of building something from nothing taught me. The people who underestimate you are handing you the exact advantage you need. Let them. Watch. Write things down. And when the moment comes to speak, you never have to raise your voice to be heard. The truth is loud enough on its own. If someone in your life has ever mistaken your patience for weakness, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story hit home, hit that like button, subscribe for more real family justice stories, and I'll see you in the next one.